The need for work-life balance is more important than ever, especially given the unpredictable, often under-pressure workplace environment and the added blurring of lines between work and personal. It becomes crucial for both employers and employees to have a fresh perspective and refresh choices and compulsions around the importance of working and living. NHRDN brings to you a discussion with seasoned professionals and authors, Mr. Krish Shankar, Mr. R. Sankar Subramanian, Ms. Anuranjita Kumar, in conversation with Ms. Ankita Jain. Ankita has 10 years of professional experience in various fields within HR. She is currently working with Microsoft and has previously worked with Johnson and Johnson. She is very passionate in the areas of D&I and leadership development and strongly believes in creating an impact by giving back to the society. I now request Ms. Ankita to please introduce our esteemed panel of speakers to the audience and take the session forward. Thank you. Over to you, Ms. Ankita.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ipshit. Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome. My name is Ankita, and it's my absolute honor to moderate this panel discussion at the NHRDN 24th National Conference. The topic of the discussion is about refreshing choices and compulsions around the importance of living and working. And for this discussion today, I'm joined by an esteemed and stellar panel of HR experts who are also authors of some best-selling books. So please join me in welcoming Anuranjita Kumar, Krish Shankar, and R. Sankara Subramanian. Let me start by introducing our esteemed speakers. I'll start with Anuranjita. So Anuranjita, or Anu, is a human resource veteran with over 26 years of experience working across the globe, managing various assignments, including senior HR roles in Asia, North America, and Europe, through her stints at City Royal Bank of Scotland and P&G. She was heading HR for the international hubs in RBS for about 3 years prior to her entrepreneurial journey. And prior to that, she has held a variety of senior roles in Citi as the MD and CHRO for Citi South Asia, head of HR for EMEA banking based in London, talent lead in NYC. Anu is now the founder and CEO for VACE, which is a global platform focused on engaging, enabling, and employing women in the industry. Anu has been recognized and featured on the Economic Times Women Ahead List 2018. She was further recognized in 2019 for being an astute role model for India by a leading Asian D&I organization. These are just few amongst many other recognitions bestowed earlier in her career. Anu is also a gifted author of having launched her second best-selling novel last year, which is Color Matters, primarily addressing the issue of racial and color discrimination. Her earlier bestseller book, Can I Have It All?, addressed opportunities of being a woman in today's life. Anu, thank you again for joining us today. It's an absolute honor to have you as a part of the panel.
Thank you. Pleasure is all mine. Thank you.
Great. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. R. Sankara Subramanian. Sankar, as he likes to be addressed, has over 37 years of professional experience in HR, consulting, OD, and applied behavioral science. During his professional journey, he has had hands-on experience in OD, people process implementation, personal growth, leadership and team development, executive coaching, and whole system change interventions. He has designed and facilitated OD interventions for corporate for more than 52 countries. Currently, Sankar is an international director on the board of NTL and director of Change Works, a boutique consulting organization based out of Mumbai. In his own words, he says, I'm a student of myself. Self-awareness has been a preoccupation for the past 40 years of my life. Sankar has published many papers in the field of OD, AI, and personal growth in journals like OD Review, AI Practitioner, and many Indian publications. He's author of the book, If You Feel Good, You Work Good. Relationships Lead to Results, a book on leadership challenges in these uncertain times. Sankar, we are so grateful with your presence here today and a very warm welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Ankita. It feels nice to be introduced by you in the way you introduce. I also start saying, oh, okay, I mean, I'm that. So it feels good to be told like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then we have Dr. Krish Shankar. Dr. Krish Shankar is the EVP and Group Head of Human Resource Development at Infosys. Krish has over 35 years of experience and has led several global HR functions in organizations like Bharti Airtel, Hindustan Unilever, and Unilever. Prior to joining Infi, Krish was the head of HR for South Asia at Philips. In his wide-ranging experience in these organizations, he has led transformation of HR into a strategic partner, facilitated organization-wide transformations and capability development. Krish holds a postgraduate diploma in HR from XLRI and has received an executive certificate in strategy and organization from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. Krish is an avid reader, loves wildlife photography and trekking. A football enthusiast, he occasionally runs half marathons. Dr. Krish Shankar is the immediate past national president at the National HRD Network. Krish also turned author with his debut book, Catalyze, Power Up Your People Ecosystem, which talks about the secret sauce to make business successful, which is nothing but its people. Krish, a very warm welcome. Thank you so much with your esteemed presence.
Thank you. Thank you to be here. Good afternoon, everybody. A pleasure to be here, and thank you, Ankita.
Great. So thank you all for taking out time to be with us today. Through the topic, which is refreshing choices and compulsions around the importance of living and working, we'd like our speakers to provide context on how we HR professionals can shape our strategies, given the new and the larger context of all the socio-economic changes in the world, especially India, and the impact of pandemic. The great disruption of 2020, 2021, and yes, it's been long 2 years, has led many people to reconsider the way they live and work, the way they relate to those around them, the life choices that they make. Maybe it's a career change they've always been thinking of, a new resolution about their social life, or maybe a new healthy habit they've found time for since they didn't have to commute. Whether we look at the work trend index or the great attrition, I think there's a strong research that proves that our talent landscape has fundamentally changed. More than 40% of our global workforce is considering leaving their present employers. And within that, almost 46% are planning major career transitions. More than 70% of workforce want to continue with the flexible ways of working. So pandemic has really given people that time to pause, think, reflect, and make choices. And while we are all learning as we go, but we know few things for sure, that flexible work is here to stay and the talent landscape has fundamentally changed. Pandemic and the remote work has created new job opportunities for some, offered more family time for a lot of us, provided more options whether and when they want to commute. But there are also challenges ahead. It has made some of us make those compulsive decisions, maybe made us feel more siloed and talk about digital exhaustion, which is so real. So with that, I really want to open it up to our panelists to talk a little bit more about their books, its relevance in the larger context of the socio-economic changes that are taking place. So I'll start with Krish. So Krish, your book Catalyze is really a handy playbook which talks about how we can unlock our people potential. So can you talk a little bit more about your book, and especially as organizations are relooking at defining talent and what really matters to them now? So can you talk a little bit more about its relevance in that context?
Okay. Thank you. No, I think this book was really a kind of a practical playbook. What I did was, the idea came during the pandemic, actually, around August of 2020. And I was thinking about it. And I said, let's try and put it down in terms of, because there are two things that are happening, there's lots of changes that's happening around and lots of new research was emerging. And I was very clear that HR has got to change in the future. So what I did was got in my practical experience of those years, plus some inputs from many leaders, CHROs and others, and tried to blend in some of the newer emerging theories and said, okay, what should be the playbook or some kind of a playbook for HR in the future? Yeah. And it's a very practical outcome-based thing saying, what are the 10 things we need to do and how do we do that? So people should read it and and find out for themselves how they like it.
Great. Thank you so much, Krish. Anu, the pandemic really gave us that moment to pause, think about what we really want from our lives. It's really transforming the way we work. People are exploring how they can achieve more in link with their larger purpose of life. So tell us more about your books, and I really love the title, Can I Have It All? So the question is, can we really have it all? And what's your perspective on the choices we see the workforce of today is making?
Thank you, Ankita. It's a pleasure to be here, and I can endorse what Krish has written to start with, because as he knows, I gave him my views on the book. So it's a fabulous read. I think even before Can I Have It All, I think COVID has been a real mover shaker in a way for all of us, right? And it's kind of paused life like we never knew, and it's sent us back thinking about, for me, it was personally that no one on their, I mean, sorry to be morbid, but no one on their deathbed is thinking about how much I wish I had spent more time in office. There are always personal regrets, and there are lots of studies about it. So the motto was that never get so busy making a living that you forget making a life. And the moment one kind of realizes there, and the definition of what that all means changes. So can you have it all? The answer is absolutely yes. The definition of what all means to you is something which is very subjective. So my books are actually more a storytelling, and they are more biographical. I tend to write about what I have gone through in life and what I've seen, people around me go through in life. And Can I Have It All is all about, we all want to have it all, don't we? And so how do you prioritize, and how do you go about things? And so I think in our lifetime we don't have enough time to make all the mistakes, so it's best to learn from other people's mistakes. And so that's what I've written about in Can I Have It All. It largely talks to women, but I think it also talks to men, to tell them what women go through at workplace. And to me, the theme of having it all has actually become stronger during COVID, and which is what prompted the whole color matters debate, because in some way COVID has also, melted boundaries geographically and otherwise. And I think time will tell how remote working and hybrid working is really going to pan out. But I think both Color Matters and Can I Have It All talk about how we have to find similarity in our differences. What is those connects which keep us together? Because behind the gender and below the color of the skin, the color of the blood is always red. So we are similar in many ways, and we are different in some ways. So how do we really connect? How do we really collaborate as human beings? And I have to confess, I may be an old foggy, but I've been traveling around the countryside lately and meeting all my teams. And I just feel that nothing works like a face-to-face yet. So I would have loved to be in person with everybody here, but we are where we are. And, I think going back to your question, can you have it all? Absolutely. I think just keep evolving with times, what the definition is. All this is finally about the purpose and the value that you want to choose for your life. And so the choices which you mentioned, you make are accordingly. I think many a times in life, as they say, na, wo thoda hum bhatak jate hain, right? So and so is doing this, and so is doing this. I wish I had this job. I wish I did this. And for me, after a big corporate career, moving out, becoming an entrepreneur was a massive decision. And it was the toughest choice I've ever, more than choosing my husband. It's the toughest choice I've ever made in my life, right? And I thought, I doubted, hoga, nahi hoga. Today, 16 months down the line, when I look back, it's probably the best choice I've made. So it's all about what you want and what's your purpose. And that defines whether you can have it all or not.
Great. I think that was so inspiring to listen to that, Anuranjita. And I think what you mentioned is also something which I'll go to Sankar, because his book, If You Feel Good, You Work Good, really talks about how some of the old dogmas and strategies may not work now, especially in this double VUCA world, as you call it, Sankar. So your book really talks about that importance of relationships at work, right? Those connections at work, the experience of a workspace, which even Anu was kind of referring to. So with this entire hybrid, I think the way we now look at relationships, the way we look at workplace is completely changing. So tell us more about your insights and perspective on building those meaningful connections and workspace, especially in this hybrid context.
Yeah, thank you, Ankita. And it's interesting that what Krish is saying and what Anu are saying and what I will be saying, there's a connecting thread, and I think we are all talking about very similar things. That's interesting. And I must say that my book, I'm showing this book so to everybody with very lot of pride, that thanks to the pandemic, I wrote the book. So, it's almost like a godsend. I have been wanting to talk about this organization. It's a Citicorp Overseas Software Limited, where I worked many years ago. I was a young manager, HR manager in that company. And I always thought that that company was an outlier of its times, and how that message is relevant today. And many times I saw that HR people are mostly looking at what is the future, what is the future. But I think we need to learn from the past as well. I think history teaches us a lot, and we need to learn from that. That was the reason why I wrote this book. And I think there are three dimensions that I talk about in this book. The first one, which is the title itself, says relationships lead to results. And I think in this so-called hybrid world or virtual world, whatever you want to call it, connections, human connections are the most significant. And I think this pandemic has shown us the value of human connections. Imagine if you are in COVID and you were put into a hospital, and you, not even your family member, your dearest person can be with you in that hospital. So you will really feel lonely in that situation, and you really feel the need for human connection. And I think human connection happens when organizations believe that's the primary purpose of bringing people together. And when that happens, results will happen. When people feel connected, when people feel committed, when people feel that there is a purpose which is larger, like Anu also talked about, um, when that happens, results are a natural outcome of it, rather than focusing on the result itself. So that's one very, very important area. And the second thing, which is very important in this context, especially in the hybrid world and virtual world, is that people lose the sense of identity with the organization. I mean, I'm sure the thousands that work for Infosys feel proud to say that I am an Infosian, and I carry that card. And that identity to be part of this organization, or Microsoft or Citibank for that matter, that's so important. And when you feel away from the system, you don't feel part of that four walls, you don't see the people around, because the space is also a very much important part of our identity. And hence it becomes very crucial that organization leaders cultivate that sense of being together even in this virtual world. So how do you do that? How do you create that culture? How do you create that sensitivity for inclusivity within the system? Is the other powerful message I have tried to communicate through my book. And the sense of identity and purpose, that's so important, because it can easily get lost. And when we talk about those great resignations and all that, it's not so much about people leaving the system, but people being resigned within the system. That's more dangerous for us, as institutions. So how do we create that vibrancy, that connectedness, that commitment? And we have done it. And also important thing is that when Coastal was there in 1985, that was the beginning of the IT industry. And, even Infosys was not even born, I think, at that point of time. TCS was just about 1,000 people, and, things like that. And we built multi-billion-dollar industry in 25, 30 years. And today we are in the throes of another wave that is happening with the new technologies, the machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all that kind of stuff. And we are in that wave which is going to begin. And here organizations should not lose focus of the culture, the people, and the sense of identity in this virtual world. I think that's the message of the book that I've tried to communicate. So thank you for asking me this question. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. I think all the descriptions, all the books, I'm sure all of us are going to go and grab the copies for us to get more insights on what all of you have spoken. I'd like to build on what Sankar you mentioned about the great resignation. I think it's top of the mind for a lot of HR professionals as we look at the workforce. So I'd like to build a little bit more about that. While in the past we have seen huge shifts in the labor market before, but what's unique now is that people have choices. They don't want to fit their lives around work, but what they really want to do is choose work that fits the larger purpose of their life. So really want to know your perspective on the relevance of this great reshuffle, especially in the Indian context. We have a lot of literature available of what the global market is, but what's your perspective on what are those trends and shifts you are seeing in the Indian context? And with that, what do you think the organizations need to do to really enable a workforce that's highly productive and efficient? So, Anu, why don't we start and hear your perspective?
So, from an Indian perspective, I think the hybrid working place is probably here to stay. And Krish, I'm quoting you more than me uh, at this stage. And I think, the great resignation has happened because a lot of people have realized what they really want of life is maybe slightly different. And unless the ecosystem caters to that, something has shifted. And something has shifted for all of us, actually. And unless that something deep which is shifted is addressed, I think we'll continue to see churn at workplaces. From where I sit, I mean, where I obviously am much closer to the women workforce, I think the hybrid or remote working workforce is here to stay. My sense is that the challenge will be it's a bit like schools, right? Where kids haven't gone to school for 2 years and we think it's not the best thing for their social development, which is partly true. You know, there is peer learning and there is a merit of being together. I think how do we bring those water cooler conversations and how do we really build that social connect and fabric is also very important. And I don't have the right answer from metaverse to all the lovely technologies which are being discussed, but it's a tough one. And I think it has its advantages of flexibility and how people are balancing their personal social life, but it has its disadvantages from a social professional life. A lot of my best friends today are people I worked very closely with. And we grew to become friends. So where do those conversations happen? We have a lot of women on our platform who come in and saying, look, there's a generation of 2 years who has never gone to office. So how do you behave with people when you go into hybrid working? Small things. I mean, how do you dress up? People, I mean, a lot of little girls who come to a platform or young girls don't understand. So there are those challenges, and I think a solution will evolve. I won't jump to it and saying either or. I think a solution will evolve, and sometimes it's best to go with the flow and let the situation kind of result on its own. And there'll be trial and error of the industry as we hire. I mean, I yet get like lots of companies saying, hey, we want to just hire around Pune or Chennai, and I keep saying koi nahi aayega, because everybody has options. But there are other larger companies who are saying we'll set up satellite locations in smaller tier 3 tier 4 cities. So I think both on the employee side and on the industry side, we're yet grappling with that situation. To see what I see in the crystal ball is a little cloudy right now, Ankita. But my sense is the solution will evolve because both sides want to make it work. So I'm not sure I've answered your question clearly. I'm just expressing a view as I see it today.
Absolutely. And I think if you've really touched a very important point is not to really react immediately, but really evolve, see how things move and kind of look for solutions. Krish, I'll come to you and with your experience, and also that's what your book talks about, unlocking the potential. So in this situation with the kind of diverse workforce we're talking about, how do you think, what organizations need to do to really unlock the potential of this workforce that we're talking about?
Yeah. See, I think let's just look into what are the changes that have happened. Yeah, if you just step back and then look at it more objectively. I think this pandemic has kind of accelerated some changes. Yeah. I think the first one is, as you said earlier, some people are questioning, what should I be doing? There's an increased sense of, am I contributing to the larger good? Not everybody, but there are some people who are saying, is it worth it? So there is a little bit of soul searching that's going on in some cases. Secondly, the other thing that you've seen is people now have looked at flexibility, employees, and said, listen, we work for 2 years in a very remote way. How can I continue like this? How can I get greater flexibility? They may be still missing a bit of personal connection. They may be still be missing, meeting people and all that. But last 2 years, I mean, especially in large IT organizations, let's say if you look at the top of large employers, at least 50% of our employees have gone out of town. Yeah. And they're not in the towns where they used to work originally. So they've gone out of town and they are all over the country. Are they going to come back that easily? Probably no. It'll take some time, and so therefore, flexibility, a new way of working, and even those who are within the city, let's say the mid managers who are all within the city, they are now used to a bigger range of flexibility. So flexibility has become very important, and that's now kind of taken for granted. No, we have to give that flexibility. Now, therefore, it comes to what should organizations do? Yeah, and I think organizations have to look at it. Number one, there is this change in what employees want, their own mindset. There is something that they want differently, and I think that's why we've got to look at our own value, our value proposition as an employer, and come up with something. Yeah. So, what is our value proposition? I think we got to all say what is important to them. I think important to people are flexibility. Important to people are a greater focus on wellness and well-being, because now that they've all been there, that's an area where people see there's a lot more stress. Even working from home, one of the things we've seen is people who work longer hours and lack of social connection. Sometimes overworked, and therefore there is a little bit of burnout that one can see that. So well-being focus on flexibility, and also this whole question of purposing, allowing them more purposeful jobs or giving them opportunities to express their purpose. Yeah, there'll be some who will say, I don't want to do this, I want to do something else. But within the organizational framework, is there something else they can do to feel that they are doing more meaningful work? For example, can you do something like a job crafting, where you say, listen, if you're interested, for example, Ankita, you're somebody who's very interested in mentoring and doing something for others. So why don't you do it within the company? Why don't you mentor some young people? So give them those kind of things so that they feel as they're adding something more there. So I think to your question, how can we kind of look at this people thing? Yes, understand what are the changes that is happening, and how we as employers, how we as HR leaders can look at our own value proposition as employers. So there are 3 or 4 things that is coming up very strongly. This focus on well-being and social connection. How do you bring that? Number 2, flexibility, and how do you really institutionalize that? And number 3, this whole purpose thing. Yeah, that's and then the part comes about this hybrid working. And we know, and Ranjita said that hybrid working is going to be there in tech companies much more. Some others have already started working. I was there in a pharma company, and they said, no, we're all 100% in the office. So it will vary from industry to industry. But many companies where there are tech or people who can work, knowledge workers, as they say, you will have a lot more of this remote hybrid working. So how do you bring this social connection and hybrid working? These new elements of your EVP is what you got to see. Greater social connection and creating that identity with the company, greater focus on well-being, flexibility as a part of it, so that you give them that choice, which will come through hybrid working. And this thing for those who want greater purpose, how do you really do it within your organizational construct? So I stop here. I think it's a long discussion, but I just thought to give you a quick overview from my side.
Absolutely. No, I think and very relevant to all the things that you mentioned, Krish, to just step back, understand what's relevant, what is that the workforce need, and then look at what is that identity that we want out there, what's that proposition we want out there. Sankar, would love to even hear your thoughts around, what do you think this entire great reshuffle means in the India context, and any of your insights of what we can do differently as we move to this new phase.
I just want to point out that this hybrid working is not new. I mean, I remember we trying this out in Coastal way back in the 1990s. Okay. And in a limited way. In those days, technology was not that good, so we couldn't do it that well. But people did work from homes in those days as well, and on remote terminals and stuff like that. So hybrid working is not new. I think what is happening now is that hybrid working is becoming a norm rather than an exception. I think that's what is the shift that I think is happening. And both my earlier panelists talked about, Anu and Krish talked about this whole thing about well-being and social connectedness. And I think that is becoming, an issue. And I think it is not just that everybody understands this issue, but I think to me it is about how we are responding to it or how we are reacting to it. more correctly. That's where I think there is a need for change, especially with HR people. What I see, I mean, like when the pandemic hit, and after about 3 months or so, I got a lot of requests as a consultant: do some resilience workshops, do some mindfulness training, do some wellness workshops, relaxation, all kinds of these kind of requests. 1 hour, 2 hours, half an hour. The thinking seems to be that we do this training and then people will be fine. So that's not the solution. I think we need to look at some fundamentals in terms of how we look at organizations. I think we are still operating on a machine paradigm. We are operating on this thing that if there is a problem, you take this piece, fix it up, and then it will work. So if there is a hybrid working environment, and then so problems are much more complex than that. I think we need to understand that it is not a machine way of doing it. Organizations are organisms, living systems. We need to understand the complexity of it, and different people require different interventions. It is not like a standard thing that can work for everybody, because the psychological issues, the trauma some people have gone through, the relationship issues, the loneliness that some people face, especially youngsters who are living alone, and all that. So all these are different, and the kind of ways to address these also have to be different and more specific to the individual. So being more focused on individual employees rather than taking them as a collective and saying, okay, put them onto a training program or do something like that, is not the way to go ahead. And unfortunately, I sometimes feel pain that some of our HR people are doing that. And that's, to me, the way to look at it is how we can be more sensitive to individual personal issues. And there are organizations who are doing that also. I'm not saying that it is not happening at all. So I think that, to me, is an important thing. And secondly, the hybrid or virtual working from home or whatever model has to be a choice between both employees and the employer. I mean, I am seeing also some of the organizations seeing there is a monetary advantage because you save cost, and you can close offices and make all that kind of stuff. So it is also, some people don't find that you are living in a one bedroom apartment with 4 people around in the house, and everybody is working, there are children roaming around. It's not a place for working. It's like, for example, I'm sitting in a room, my wife is sitting in another room and having another conference going on. It's not easy. So I think we need to be more understanding about it, and some people want to come back and some people don't want to come back, and it also depends on their own social emotional identity. So some of us may be introverts who prefer, this is the best thing to happen to me, I don't have to see anybody, and some people love to have connections. So I think we need to see the diversity that is there. And Anu talked about women probably have a different response to it. Married women with children may have a different response to it. Men will have, so I think that that segmentation, that looking at the diversity and being sensitive even to the last person in the organization is extremely important at these times. And that will happen only when we see the larger perspective, that the paradigm is not a plug and fix and play kind of a situation. It is more of a human situation in an organization which are living systems, and we need to address it from that perspective. And that's what, and it's not something new, and that's what I talk about in my book, and that's what makes people feel good, of being cared for, being understood, being sensitive to, and that's what makes people deliver results. And that's the message that I want to give.
Great. I think, Sankar, you've really touched upon some very important aspects of how that one solution fit all approach doesn't work. Everybody has been impacted differently, uniquely, and it's very essential to understand that. So, as you said, I think pandemic has really brought in a lot of psychological, health, lifestyle, social, a lot of changes, right? And for the organizations, it has actually opened doors to a much more diverse workforce, right? Whether you look at the flexibility needs, you look at different health choices, you look at the needs based on different life stages people are at, the social relationships. I think what employees are really looking for has become more diverse, has become more unique. So with that context, what do you think organizations need to do to really operate more inclusively? whether it's operating in a hybrid meeting that they need to conduct, or maybe looking at the deal that they have in the organization through all the benefits. So, what can organizations really do to be more inclusive in their approach with this entire setup? And maybe Anu, I'll open it up for you for your thoughts on this.
I think, I'm a little pro organizations because most organizations actually make a lot of attempt. I mean, even within the NHRD network, there are lots of people I can see on the chat from various companies. I mean, I can tell you it's a mandate, it's an agenda. Without inclusion, I mean, just having a great place to work or culture is just not possible. So the effort to try and make it happen is certainly there. The intent is there, but it's not a generic thing. So even if you say, okay, it's very inclusive of women, there's single women, there are married women, there are young women, there are older women, there are all kinds of, there are mothers there. So I think the conundrum for most organization is how broad versus how deep do you go, right? And so I genuinely believe that if you generically have a culture of empathy, most importantly, it takes care of inclusion in different shapes and forms, whether you talk about LGBT, you talk about women, you talk about color or age. So I think focusing on just empathy at all ends as a driver will help drive inclusion. Inclusion, in my view, drives innovation, which drives impact, and which finally drives your bottom line. And empathy is both ways. A lot of times, even as HR head, I felt that there was a lot of pressure. You have to do this, and there has got to be this flexibility, and there's got to be this policy. So just, I don't want to be controversial, but just let's try and play this out. And given we are amongst friends, maternity leave went up to 6 months. A lot of organization went up to 8 months, went up to 12 months. Have the numbers changed? The answer is no. Actually, the numbers have dipped in the corporate workforce. And it is not just because of COVID. Even pre-COVID, the number of women, and I'm talking about blue chip company like ours, were trending at about 22 to 23%. Post-COVID, it's gone below 16%. So, sometimes as they say, na, thoda sa, it is like, we're just following the herd. If we can just follow our own culture and foster empathy, where there are times where leaders are under pressure, and as an employee, you need to understand. And there are times employees are under pressure, and the organization needs to understand. I think if we can just do that, there'll be better understanding, there'll be better bonding, thereby leading to better retention and inclusion. So that's my very simple message.
Great, thanks, Anu. Krish, in your experiences, what would be your suggestion? What will be your viewpoint on what can organizations do for a more inclusive workplace in the months to come?
Well, I think, see, as Anu said, I think many organizations are doing quite a lot. But I think we've got to now step back and say, okay, what elements of inclusion we've got to now focus on a little more. Yeah. So while inclusion is broadly fine, but given the circumstances, what is it that we need to do? I mean, for example, if you look at a hybrid environment, there is always this fear that there is a bias against people who are not physically present, and therefore is there something that we need to do? And therefore we got to really think about that consciously and see, how do we really remove that kind of a bias? Yeah. So that's number one. Number two, we're going to have, so therefore there are some areas where maybe we need to think a little more. Yeah. And therefore, as Shankar and Anu also said, yeah, during this pandemic, maybe there are some people who made some choices. Yeah. Maybe some people have caregiving responsibilities and they've said, I want to do it. Now, because of this, will they be excluded from the rest of the things? So that's something we got to do. The third thing is, I think many organizations of late have got a lot of people who've joined recently. In the last 2 years, if you look at most tech companies, 40-50% of their organization has joined in the last 2 years. The companies have all grown their headcounts in the last year. So a lot of new people. And they've never set their foot in their office, nor have they met their boss, nor have they met their colleagues. So they're all working somewhere. Now, is there a danger when there is people, how will you include them much more? How do you bring a greater connection with them? So I think while inclusion at the broader level is a lot more to do with leadership and all the processes and policies, my view would be to really go down a step and saying, okay, what are the likely break points of inclusion? Where do we need to focus a little more, emphasize a little more? It may vary from company to company. And I think just ensure that in this new model, in this new change, what is the thing that we need to keep extra care of and look at? That's what I would say.
Great, thanks, Krish. Sankar, is that similar? Is your view, is your perspective something similar? Is there anything else that you'd like to kind of recommend, suggest on how do we create that workplace?
Yeah, and I agree to many things that I think the other two panelists are saying. I would add another dimension to it. See, for example, how organizations are conducting their business in the hybrid world, for example. How much time are we spending on relationship building or being connected at an individual level to each and every person in the organization? Like Krish was saying, that a large number of people have joined the system and they have not even met their bosses, or they have not even seen how the office looks like, whatever. How are we connecting with them? Are all our conference calls and meetings only to discuss the work, or are there specific calls, for example, just to talk nothing about work, but only about who we are and what we are, for example, and our relationships, or just to get to know each other personally, for example? So I think spending time on aspects like these, in a what do you call, not that maybe at pockets it happens, and there are some managers, some leaders who are more like that, and it happens, but as a larger organizational process which is looked at. So that's, I think, that's important. The second thing that I would say, like Anu was pointing out to an interesting data, that even though the maternity leave numbers have gone up, but the number of women in the workforce in that case has gone down. No, I think sometimes it is also important. I'm just responding to that, because I've seen sometimes people look at one data element and one result and say that, okay, this is not really helping. I think it is because we have to also look at many other data elements. Because while at one level a policy change is a positive thing for women in the workforce, but what about how we treat women in the office? How safe they feel in the organization? How many other issues which are there. I don't have to. You all know about it. So, what are the ways in which we are encouraging, or we are creating the safe container for people to be who they are in the system, and not just for women, for everybody in that system? I think is also crucial. So I think if you are able to look at a collection of data and each one pointing to something, rather than taking individual events or individual pieces and trying to address them, I think we'll get into a problem. I think so. I think more time needs to be spent by us in HR to kind of gather. I mean, I'm an OD person, so I will talk the OD language, to do more diagnosis, to really go below what is apparent and go into something which is more the essence of the core of what is happening in the system. So spending time in organizational diagnosis with the people themselves, and rather than reacting to a particular event, I think is also extremely important at this point of time, so that we have more mature and more thought through interventions to bring about more inclusive and more connected and more focused well-being workplaces. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Shankar. I think beautifully said. And what also Anu and Krish mentioned, I think really stepping back and thinking what elements of inclusion are relevant, and that I think that essence of empathy, that essence of what really matters need to stay. I'd like to shift the gears a little bit, when we talk about what is there for employees, what are they looking for, right? What are people looking for? I think in addition to health, flexibility, one other aspect that's coming out is around skilling. What's in it for me, right? That's really something that employees or people are choosing to really think about their careers, about their life, what matters to them. So talking a little bit more about skilling, what do you think, what in your view the organizations need to do differently to keep relevant, to keep upskilling their workforce? And Krish, why don't we start with you, and would love to hear your thoughts on this.
No, I think skilling has become very important now. I think there's so much change happening all across, and partly the huge change in technology. The pandemic has created a greater acceleration, and especially in tech companies, there's a big demand, and lots of newer digital work has increased, etc. So therefore, skilling is becoming most important. It's like the lifeblood of any organization. So we got to ensure that there's more incentive for people to skill. There's clarity of how they need to skill, support them, and that's going to be very important. Yeah, skilling, again, there are two three parts of it. Skilling if as needed by the business, so therefore it's in line with the business, but skilling as needed by the employee, and there's something that the employee wants to learn, they're passionate about. How do you allow them to learn that? So we got to provide for both these, so that that's, I think it's a core part. Every organization is doing it, but I would like to just look at it this thing. One, what is it that is needed for the company, and how do you create pathways for that? And what can we do to really let employees explore based on their passion? Yeah, and to do this, we need some amount of incentives, some amount of career paths, people being clear about what they want to do, some kind of coaching, mentoring, so that they can choose the right things. Yeah, and once they are skilled, how do you redeploy them? Because in many industries, you got to learn, but you got to also work on it. Therefore, this whole ecosystem has to work, that you get them to skill, but also ensure that they actually start doing that job someday. Yeah, so those are the kind of things we got. Yeah, as you said, very important, and I think every company is taking it right at the center of what they want to do.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Krish. Sankar, in your view, what are some of the trends that you're seeing around skilling across organizations?
I just when the question was asked to Krishna, I don't know. So my memory went long back. I mean, shows my age, I suppose. Long ago, when NASCOM was formed, and FC Kohli unfortunately passed away last year, was the chairman and also chairman of TCS. And I was a youngster working in Citicorp, and we had a HR and HRD meet or something like that, and all of us presented something about TCS, COSIL and TCA, whatever those companies at that time, TUL, all presented about what we do in skilling and developing our people and stuff like that. And at the end, Mr. Kohli turned to all of us and said, "Gentlemen, you're all doing a great job, and I appreciate that, but we need to do much more. Remember, we are not building our organizations, we are building an industry." And I think those are prophetic words. And because one of the questions that people asked was, you hire 200 people and 180 people leave by the end of 1 year and go abroad, and why are you spending so much of money on their skills? But he said, no, we are not building an organization, we are building an industry. And I think this if you have that idea, because I think it's important, not like Chris rightly said, it is not just about what the organization needs, it is also about the passion of employees. I think if you keep that balance between the two, that yes, we need skills for the technology changes, the system changes, the world is changing, and we need those skills upgradation. And it also that there are passion that people have to build their own, the track, the career they want to. So are we sensitive to that as well? I think that that balancing of the two, and seeing it that it is not just people work with you, they attain some skills, they perform, they deliver, they will leave, but they will contribute to the industry, they will contribute to this country. I think if we can. I mean, I know it sounds altruistic, and some people say, "Oh, organizations are doing what they want to do for their business and stuff like that." But I think this large-heartedness and a broader scope of looking at skill development, I think, is extremely important for organizations.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Sankar. Anu, from your experience, what are those essential components of skilling that the organizations needs to be mindful of?
So I think Krish and Sankar have kind of answered almost everything I wanted to say. I'm always of the view, Ankita, that learning is the responsibility of each individual, right? As organizations, we can provide avenues, we can provide opportunities, but finally the choice is yours. And I think Sankar has beautifully captured that It's about the passion of the individual. I can get them. I mean, what do I need? I mean, there is a demand of a lot of tech professionals. But from where I stand in the platform I learn, a lot of women don't want to do it for whatever reason. Doesn't interest them. Now, could I force them? No. Even if I sponsor that training program and she's not interested, you're not going to get traction. So I think the point is asking people about what they want and matching that with organization preferences. From an organization perspective, there's obviously a demand in terms of growth, which is largely coming from the future technologies or the way future would look like. I mean, metaverse is a big topic, HR analytics is a big topic, data is a big topic. So those are hard and technical skills which most organizations want their employees to upgrade, right? And then there will be employees who'll step up to it. There are soft skills, like we've spoken about great resignation, we've spoken about choices that employees want to make. And they are also kind of figuring out how to work in this remote environment, balancing their personal need to work from anywhere, but also needing that socio-professional need. There are managers who are trying to figure out how to manage a remote team because they've never done that in the past. So they're trying their best to, keep their teams motivated. So I think, to me, from an organizational perspective, it's a mix of what's happening in the future, which is the hard tech stuff, consequently ancillary skill set of business skills, and the soft skills of management and connection. From an employee perspective, which I don't think we should ignore, a lot is driven about where I want to be in the future. So do I want to be, I find a lot of people now want to be freelancers. We find a lot of people saying, hey, I want to do 3 assignments at the same time. That's not easy to do. So how do I prioritize? How do I plan? Because I want to be a gig. So those are things which are coming to the forefront. And, there's plenty of play in the market with the techs and what the organization are thinking. But yeah, those will be my thoughts.
Great. I think we've touched upon a lot of aspects that's out there in the minds of people, in minds of the HR professionals, of what really they need to think of. We also have a very highly engaged audience here who are really curious and have been asking some great questions to our speakers. So I'd like to pick up a few questions on their behalf and open it up to Krish, Anu, Sankar, for you to kind of share your thoughts around it. One of the questions that we have from Gaurang is, do the panelists foresee any upcoming trend in the retirement age as a rule? If yes, what HR professionals need to be ready for? So, any of you would want to pick that up?
I don't think there'll be any retirement age. I think, you may retire from a corporate role. And, I have 2 kids who are 23 and 18. My younger one already wants to take a 5-year break. I don't know what he wants to do with his life. So I think the whole concept of retirement, like you become old and now you should enjoy PF, my parents went through that. But honestly, when I look at myself, I think work is an integral part of who I am. It keeps me growing. It keeps me on the path. If I give up work, I think I lose a piece of my identity. So retirement is equated to whether you're working for financial returns. So, I think the definition of retirement is going to change. I think for organizations, there'll be a lot about how do you keep that population skilled with the future. I mean, it's like our parents who are learning how to operate Instagram or Facebook at a much later age, and leverage their experience, because I do believe that there's a huge amount of wealth and richness with the experience that a certain generation goes through.
Great.
I think I just want to add to that. I mean, what will happen lots in the future is that I think people will really swap careers. There is, you working in a corporate, you'll do something else. So you'll really pivot and do very different careers. Now, retirement, like the old concept of retirement, that you kind of, you work at the age of 58 or 60, you kind of say that's end of life and you will do something. That may not be there. But I think early on, you may say, listen, I've done this, I want to do something else. You're doing corporate, you want to do entrepreneurial. Like Anu, you're saying, I've done this, I want to do something in the social sector. So you'll have people pivoting, doing many more things. Yeah. And therefore, retirement will get more blurred. If life in corporate is a kind of a substitute for retirement, that may come down. So people may really like to explore other things. That's what I feel.
Yeah, I also agree with both of them, and so I can see myself, starting my role as an HR manager, and then leaving the corporate world, becoming a consultant, becoming a teacher, running OD certificate programs, now being a writer. So I have, retirement. It's a, like a retreading of the tires. So you have new tires coming in and new ways of looking at things. So yeah, I think, and work is very become an integral part of life. I think my father, or I'm sure many of your parents, they worked for earning and a living and providing us a decent lifestyle and stuff like that, right? But I think today it's almost impossible not to be working, because it's part of who you are, as a, defines you as a person. So I think it is not going to go away. But I think what Chris said is, I mean, I've seen people at 30 years of age saying that, okay, I'm enough of this world, I'm changing something completely, I'm doing something else. People taking this furloughs and saying that, okay, I'm doing 3 years, I'm going to travel around the world or do something else and come back. I think these are going to be more the trends for the future. And people are, the old model of working, saving money for the future, and then when you retire, then you have enough money stored in the bank. I think that model is going away. I think people are willing to take risks with their life. People are willing to be more in the here and now of living, rather than looking at. I think that trend is catching up, and I can see it in my surrounding, and I'm sure it is happening all around.
Very interesting. I think very interesting insights of how do we look at it, and just being aware that people are continuously experimenting. I think that's a great place to begin. We have another question from Ruchi, who says that how can leaders really create a psychological safety in the organizations? So, any thoughts from any of you?
I think Anu used the word empathy. I suppose. I think to me, is a very, very important word for leadership. Putting yourself in the other person's shoes, literally. I think that's the real meaning of the word empathy. And I think um, leaders who are empathetic, and leaders who use power in a productive way. I think power is a very, I mean, psychologically, as you know, power is one of the most powerful as well as most, can be really creating problems for people. And I think ability to hold power in a productive way, in a functional way, in an empathetic way, sensitive way, I think is the most important requirement for leaders today and tomorrow, I think.
Now, I just want to add a quick bit to it, just to just peel the onion a little further. I think at the first stage, psychological safety is all about feeling included. Yeah. So therefore, if you're in a team, how do you feel included as being part of the team? Yeah. So therefore, that's the first one. I think the second stage comes really where, your kind of contribution is recognized. You're given something, and therefore you expect, you value the contribution. Yeah. The third stage is when you start making mistakes. You start learning and you make mistakes, and then the team and the boss says, "Fine, go ahead, do it." There is this thing of making mistakes, but you are kind of doing wrong things, but still the boss and the manager kind of supports you. Yeah. And the last is when you start questioning the status quo. When somebody in the team says, "Why are we doing this? Why are you doing this?" That's the level. So there are 3 or 4 levels. I think as managers, we got to try and reach the tops. Get people to really question it. Let them fail. Support them in their failures, encourage their contribution. So therefore, that's the thing, and at the base of it, make them feel included. Yeah. So I think empathy is there, inclusion is there, allowing them to contribute, telling them, supporting them, making them learn and fail, and supporting them, and then ensuring that you listen to even criticism and questions. Kind of, those are the kind of things we need to do to create psychology.
Great. Awesome. I think with that, we are on time. I personally really enjoyed the entire conversation today. And I think the essence of that personal connections, the essence of really establishing those relationships, what Anu, I think, said about creating that empathy, I think that's where the entire thing starts, and really understanding how the needs of our workforce is evolving, how their choices are evolving, and just being more aware of it, and just not treating everything in one way. I think just kind of reflecting back and customizing our way ahead in terms of the need of a workforce. So I think personally, some great takeaways that I had. With that, I'd really like to thank Anu, Krish, Sankar for your time, for joining us today into this such interesting and so relevant conversation that we had. I'm sure that our audience has also been able to take away some great insights from your experiences, from your perspectives, and they'll definitely help them navigate the future at their workplaces. I'd like to thank our audience as well for being with us, sharing your thoughts and questions with us. So once again, thank you so much, everyone, for a great conversation today. Back to you,
Thank you,
Akshat.
Ankita, for doing a wonderful job of, holding the
Absolutely.
space and having the conversations directed. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
Thank
all.
you.
Pleasure
Pleasure.
being here. All the
Bye.
best.
Thank
Thank
you, Mr.
you.
Krish Shankar, Ms. Anuranjita Kumar, Mr. R. Sankar Subramaniam, for catalyzing our thoughts to get it all while parallelly focusing on balancing work and life together so that we feel good and work good. Let's join hands to power up the people ecosystem. Thank you, Ms. Ankita Jain, for coordinating a beautiful multidimensional flow of this discussion. Thank you, participants, for the excitement you have shown since morning as we move to the second last session for the day. NHRDN thanks you all once again. Thank you.
Thank you.